All right, class, this is going to be a longer tutorial of how to create an entire homepage or index page in brackets or HTML. So I wanted to kind of rewind because we do not just jump into the code, but there's actually a lot of planning that goes on before you even type any code in your HTML. So if we look here, this is the mock-up that we will be working on. I created it in Photoshop. You can see it's pretty organized, pretty being the keyword. And what I did then, after I was done with my comp, hide this, and I went over to Illustrator, and this really helps. So here's the comp again. I brought it in, and basically I want to make a wireframe of my finished comp. That way I can use this as a guide to coding. So let's kind of rewind here a second, and you can see that I kind of figure out my boxes. So these are my divs, or my elements that we're going to be adding. So you can see here, if I hide this, I kind of just create this grid of columns. So at the top here, I have a one column. So you can see this is going to be the logo. This is my nav bar. This is my left column, my right column. So the pie on the left is going to be within its own box or div, and the right is going to be its own div. Now notice how in the right I have a headline, body copy, a button, some strawberries. There's a lot of stuff there, but that can all go into one div. So you want to kind of think about this as columns as you would a magazine layout. We don't need to put divs within divs within divs within divs. That's just going to overcomplicate. So you want enough divs that you can create columns, but not too many divs that your life's going to be crazy and you're going to have too many divs and it's going to be hard to keep them straight. So finding that happy medium. And I think a great thing to do is to mock this up like this. You can see this is a 2-column layout, and then down here I have a 3-column layout, and then the footer is going to go down here at the bottom. So I mock that up so I can kind of get an idea. And then after I feel comfortable with this, I do have a big container div here that's containing all these elements. So they would not fly all the way to this side of the page or all the way to this side of the page. You need a kind of box to keep everything centered. Then I think about my naming convention. So I'll go back and think, okay, so I'm going to call this div or box a container. This is going to be called logo. Here I'm going to use my nav HTML5 tag. Here this is going to be called left. This is going to be called right, red, column, 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 and then footer. So I can kind of make sense of this here, right? I'm organizing it, and I can see this is the right amount of divs for this page. Then I finally go back, and I usually do fonts and colors. So here I found the hex number of each one of these colors that make up my comp, so I can use these. That really helps. I also get my fonts distributed and make sure if I'm using Google Fonts or Typekit or FontFace, whatever you're using there. And now I'm ready to actually start coding. So a good thing to remember is if you're at this part and you want to show this to me to kind of get approved per se and make sure that you have enough divs or not enough divs, that would be a great idea. So let's move on. I'm going to go back now to, let's hide, to brackets. And what I want to do here is make sure my root folder is being used for brackets. So I would go to my desktop or wherever your folder is, and for this one, we're Slice website. So I'm going to take that folder and just drop it into that left sidebar, that dark gray sidebar, which then brings all the elements kind of linking to them on this left side. Now, if you look at this, I have really basic stuff already done for you, but let's go over it and make sure you understand what we're looking at. So here I have just the doc type at the top. That's just standard. We're starting the HTML document. We have a head. In the head, we have a meta. That's just for the browser, so just to leave that there. We have a title. That's going to be at the top of your browser window, so let's place our title here. And then place our name here. And then here we're linking to our style sheet. You can see it's linking to a file called styles.css, which is in that folder. And it's our CSS. That's our really important to make all our styles, make it way prettier and not the standard HTML tags. And then I'm linking to a Google font called Merriweather. And I think we need to link to it here. So the second part of that, remember, is to make sure we have that there. There it is, sorry. I forgot to do this. I just need this font family. And what I'm gonna do here in my styles is I'm gonna add this to the body. So all the fonts on the whole site would be Merriweather, unless I would override that. So I'm gonna put body, squiggly, squiggly. So anything within these two squigglies would happen to the entire page. Think about the body as like your background canvas if you are painting a picture. It's just a white blank canvas that doesn't even have, has nothing, no size, nothing. So I'm just going to set my font families. And I'm also going to put margin 0, padding 0. By default, websites have a really small padding within it. So we're just going to kind of neutralize that out until we learn about CSS Reset. So now I can save this. We'll go back here and we're linking to, there's our font and we have it now in our body. We're closing the head. Think about the head as just all that background information in the brain that you need. And then in our body right now, the main guts of our website, there's nothing. So we have a blank canvas we're going to start with. When I come to styles, here again is for the browser for linking the meta tag. And then I always put this, and this might be helpful for you to use as well, is in a CSS comment, meaning does nothing for the page, you won't see anything, it's just kind of like side notes to yourself. I put the hex numbers to all the colors I'm going to use. It makes life so much easier as we're moving forward that you can just copy and paste and you don't have to go back to your original document, get your eyedropper out, eyedropper the color, or use a generic color. So I think that makes life easier. My first tag is usually body. That always has this margin 0, padding 0. Then I commented another section that's really important. We're going to talk a little bit about IDs and classes. So IDs and classes are ways to attach CSS properties to divs. And you want to think about a div as a box. And we are going to be using a lot of divs. We're also going to be using a lot of HTML5 tags. And I think the book goes into this really nicely. So let's go back to our index page and start coding. So what you want to get the habit of is to add the object in the HTML and then add the style in the CSS, then test. Object, style, test. And repeat this as you go forward. You don't want to code the whole HTML and then you're going to just get so many problems. It's kind of it's a process of a little bit view, a little bit view. So I'm going to start, if we go back to this, and I'm going to start with this container because everything is within this container. The logo, the nav, the left, and the right. So I'm going to make a box. It's going to be a box, and I'm going to call it, I'm going to use the ID first, container. So the difference between using an ID and a class, they both are attaching CSS styles, but an ID can only use once on this page, and classes we could use multiple times. If that gets too confusing and just like your brain, just use classes. You can use them once, you can use them multiple times, but for this example, I'm just going to use an ID. So whenever I use a div, when I close the div or have the /div, I always comment, and again, you'll see it grays this out, closing container. And this is because all the divs are going to have the same closing, and it just gets super confusing if we don't exactly state what this is closing. So this is opening the box and closing the box. Now let's nest or put a couple things within our container. So the first thing we did was the logo. So I'm just going to put div class, I'm using the other one, logo. And you can see there it's closing the box. And in that box, we actually want to put the logo. So I'm going to do my image tag, the source of my image tag. So I need an equal sign, quotes, and I have a logo PNG in there. And then make sure you do the greater than. So this is the image tag, and you need the less than and greater than, like that. Let's save that and preview it. So I'm going to go up to that little lightning bolt. And if we look at the page, we should see the image of the logo.png. If you do not see that, it's probably a typo or you're missing something, so take a closer look. Notice how we do something and then test. Well, let's give this container a style and logo. So I'm going to go to my styles.css, and I'm going to add in here, so I have a little note that says IDs need a pound in front of them and classes need a period. So if I used ID equals container, over here, this needs to be pound container, squiggly, squiggly. Now, if I used a class for logo, over here, it's going to be period logo, squiggly, squiggly. So you could use either. IDs can only be used once on a page, but classes can be used more than once. Then you just need, it would not work without that the pound or the period. All right, so let's give the container some properties. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a width and a height. So after I make a div, I go to my CSS, and I always start with width and height. So I'm going to do width 960 and height. Let's just do, and you can always adjust this later. Let's do 800 pixels. So now our box has a width and a height. And I'm going to come up to the body, and I want the body not to be just this static white background. I actually have a background image that's in our images folder that will be repeating and tiling on the back of the page. So if I go up to body, I'm going to do background image. And you can kind of arrow down to URL. And I'll have the parentheses, images, and let brackets help you out a little bit. What was I looking for? Oh, background. So it's called bg.gif, and then semicolon. So notice at the end of each new rule, we have a semicolon. It basically says we're done with that rule. We're going to move on to the next. So here we have a background. If I kind of scroll over, the nice thing is brackets kind of shows us what that image looks like and also the dimension of it in pixels. So now we have a background image that's repeating, and then we have a white, well, it's a box, and I want to make it a white box. So let's add to our container background color, and the hex for white is FFF, save. And now let's preview it again. So what we should see is a polka dot background and then a white box. And if you have a big enough monitor, you can probably view both at the same time, which is nice. So perfect. So far, so good. But what you notice here is notice how the white box is all the way on the left side of the page. I want it to be centered in the page. So what I'm going to do is on that white box, the container, I'm going to add, I'll do this, so sometimes it makes it easier to read. I'm going to add margin auto. So what this does is the margin on the left and right and top and bottom will be automatic to be the middle. So it's basically going to put that box in the center. Now if we gave this a specific margin, it would do a specific number of pixels. So let's go over here. You can see now we have our white box. It's nice and center. And as we kind of move this page, it always stays centered, which is nice. All right, so now we want our logo to be centered. So we have to do kind of the same thing that we just did for that white box. So I'm going to come back here. We already have our logo. Now what I want to do is that same process. So I want to know what the width and the height of the logo is. So I can come back to brackets, or you can open up the image in Photoshop and look at the pixel dimension. But it's 127 by 127, meaning over here I can do a width colon of 127 by height 127. And I'm going to do, I don't need a background color or a background image, so I'm just going to do margin auto again so it centers it in the middle. And there we go. Margins auto is really nice for centering divs. If I wanted to center text or an image, I would use text align center. So, you know, again, since this is our first website, that kind of is confusing. But if you want to center something, margins auto or text align center, which we're going to be doing next. Okay, so we did this, everything worked out. We can go back to our index page now, and I'm going to do another, oops, and I didn't note what this is closing. So I'm going to add another comment here that says this is closing the logo. You can already see how this is going to start becoming a little bit confusing. Remember, white space does not matter in HTML. It does add size, but at this point we're not worried about size. This isn't these are not dense websites. We use the white space to organize better. So I like to margin in if something is nested. Notice how the logo is within the div, so the container div. So I like to margin in there. Maybe you want to push that down a little bit so it's not in the way. Whatever you feel comfortable with, you'll develop your own routine. I think comments can be a really huge help in organization. All right, so underneath the logo is, if we look back here, is our nav bar. And for nav, we can actually use the HTML5 tag nav. So, and you'll notice if you start typing nav, it has nav open and close, which is perfect. We don't have to worry about commenting what that is closing because it's pretty obvious what that is closing. So within the nav, I'm going to put my nav bar. So I want to have a home button, an about page, and a contact page. So these are going to be links. So you're going to do a less than sign, a spacebar, href. We're linking and hyper-referencing to the index page. And in that text, we're going to put home. So the home button goes back to index page. Makes perfect sense. We're working right now on the home page, and it's going to go back to that page. So even though we're on the page, you still, for the other pages, are going to want to link back. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that 2 more times. I'm going to kind of margin those in so you can see, because these are all nested within the nav. And I'm going to change this one to about and this one to contact. So this is the text in the button. And I'm going to change what page they're linking to about or contact. Now these pages are not made yet. We haven't made them, but we're going to in the future. So we're anticipating future pages before we actually have created them, which is fine. So I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to test it again and kind of see where I have. So we do have our 3 buttons. You can see they're the default blue or the purple. They have the underline, they're left align, but they're there. They work. Now I can style them. So I'm going to jump back to my style sheet. And for navigation, we're going to do a couple different rules here. So the first one we're going to do is the nav bar itself, which will be just nav squiggly squiggly. Now notice it doesn't have a pound sign or a period in front of it, which is because it's actually an HTML5 tag. We don't need it. That's why we don't have a div and an ID or a class. So that's nice and easy. We don't have to have a little bit extra there. And then we need nav A, squiggly squiggly, and then nav A colon hover. Spacing is very important right here, so we don't want any space, and here we want space after nav. Now what these are is those links, the A tag, in the nav. So this is saying that in the nav, there's an A tag, and I want it to look like this. In the nav, there's an A rollover, something that rolls over, and I want it to look like this. So this is actually just the physical box that all these buttons are in. This is the button, and then this is the button rollover. So we'll kind of just play with how that looks. So let's just give it a color to make this start slow. So I'm going to make this color. I'm going to come up here, and the color of mine is going to be brown. Color, remember, is the font. And I want the rollover color to change to red. Oops, too many times. And I'm going to look and make sure this works. So if I come over here, we can see now they're brown and rollover's red. So works great. Obviously some more issues that we can go through. So I want to take off the underline. So on the A, I'm going to say text decoration none. And these are just tags you have to memorize. The more you use them, the more you code, the easier it's going to be. I'm going to give the box itself a width of, I'm going to say 100%. So that's going to span the entire length and give a height of 50 pixels. So you can notice here that not only can I use pixels for dimension, but I can use percentages as well. And I'm going to add here text align center. And what that'll do is it pushes them, here you can see the height, the width, and they're centered on the page. Perfect. Now what I'm going to do is I want to put some space in between them because right now you read them as one long word or sentence. So what I'm going to do on the nav A, on the links, I'm going to put margin left, let's do 50 pixels, and margin right. So the space on the left of the link and the space on the right, I want to have 50 pixels on each side, which smooths them apart like that. And that looks much better. Now this is touchy, which I don't like either. So I'm going to come to my nav and I'm going to put a margin on the top of, let's do, I guess, 25 pixels. And I'm just, kind of guessing. You'll look at it. If you like it, keep it. If you want to change the number, change it. It's trial and error. That looks great. So here we have our whole top kind of coded how I wanted it to be. Now that that's done, we're going to come down and do two columns here on the pie on the left and a bunch of stuff on the right. So here's a 2-column layout. Coming back over, I'm going to go back to my index, and underneath my nav, I'm still in the container, I'm still in that white box, but I'm going to do another box or div. I'm going to say class equals left. So I have a box that I called left. And then I'm going to put another one, div class equals, see how repetitive this becomes? Right. So usually if I do 2 columns, I'll call one left and one right. So 2 different boxes, 2 different names. One's going to go on the left side of the page, one's going to go on the right. In the left one, I have an image of a pie, so I'm going to put my image tag. I think it's called, yep, there it is, pie. Save. And on the right, I have a headline that I saved as an image because it's a decorative font. It's on a slant. I didn't think we were ready to start challenging that yet. So I have another image of a heading.png. And let's just preview that just so you can see. So we have something on the left and something on the right. They're two images. And if we come here, you can see, but one isn't on the left and the other isn't on the right. That's because we didn't do the CSS yet, which is going to say the width and height of each one of these, and one's going to float to the left side of the page, and one's going to float to the right side of the page. So if we jump back to our styles, notice here that this is called class left, class right. I'm going to come back here, hit enter a couple times. Period left, squiggly, squiggly, period right. So now we're setting properties for the left and the right div. And we could do this several ways. We could do this with pixels or percentages. For this first one, for the two columns, we'll do pixels. So if I come here, the pi is 558. So I'm going to actually come here and say width 458, sorry, pixels. And for the right, I'm basically going to minus, we know the container's 960, the white box, and what is left, 960 minus 458 is, I think, 502. Yes. So here I'm going to do a width of 502 pixels. And I'm going to have this one float to the left side, so float left, and this one's going to float right. I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to just check it out. Let's see. Perfect. So we have one column on the left and one column on the right. Pretty cool. Now, let's go and put some more content in here so you can see you can put more than one thing into a div. So we have this image. Now, underneath that, I'm going to put a paragraph. So I'm going to put a P tag, and I'm going to be using Lorem Ipsum, specifically Cupcake Ipsum. Save. I'm going to add a image of a strawberry. And then I'm also going to add an image of a button. And it's called Order Now. Save. And let's just take a look at what that looks like. Looks pretty good, pretty good. A couple things we want to change there. And again, this is why I preview, take a look at it, and then go back to the CSS and change things. So I look at this, a couple things that I want to do. One, I think the font's a little bit too big. Creating hierarchy of your typography is going to be super important. So you can see it's the same size as both of these, which is 16 pixels. The leading is really tight. The Order Now button isn't clickable. The logo isn't clickable. And this is really touchy on this side. So let's kind of fine tune all this before we move forward to the 3 column, which will be underneath. All right. First thing is that logo at the top. Let's make that clickable. So what I want to do is I want to wrap the image in an ahref. So I want to wrap it in a link. So I'm going to do ahref equals, and when they hit the logo, I want it to go home. So it's going to go to my index page. Now notice, right now, I have that. Looks great, except there's nothing in the A. There's nothing clickable. So I have to, since I kind of did this after the fact, I'm going to make sure my image tag is nested between my opening A and my closing A to make sure it's clickable. Anything within that area. So save that. Now, let's go down here to the right. I'm going to do the same thing with the Order Now button. So I'm going to add an active link, and this one's going to go to my contact.html, which is not made yet, but it's going to. And I'm going to make sure the button, or that order now.png, is nested between that again. So if I come over here, you can see that my icon changes from the arrow to the hand on the button and on the logo. Now these don't have rollover effects, which I would definitely suggest doing. Anything that's clickable at some point should have a rollover, but we'll get to that later. Don't worry about that right now. Okay, so let's deal with some of these other issues like the typography. So I'm going to come back to my styles, and we have the nav A. So I'm going to make that a little bit bigger to create some hierarchy. So this is font size, and I'm going to make it 20 pixels. And then I'm going to set a paragraph, a P tag, no period or pound in front of it. This is just a basic tag, a P tag. And I'm going to do a font size here of, let's say, 13 pixels. Let's try 14. Save. And I'm going to add a leading. So it's not leading, of course, because that's too easy. It's going to be called line height. And I'm going to make the line height 20. So if I take a look at that now, you can see that we have a nice font size. I think this could actually be more. Ah, that feels airier. Okay, so you can see here now we actually have some decent typography. Now let's fix this on the side. So this is padding. We've been using margin, which is the space on the outside of the div. And let's see if I can grab an image to explain the difference between margin and padding easily. No, this is the infamous one. Okay, so in this image, it shows us nicely. Here's our content, which is our type, our text, our paragraph. The padding is inside the div. The margin is outside the div. And if we had a border, it would be this green in the center. So when you want things to be inside the padding, in this case, we want that because we want it to be maintained in the white, we add padding. So I'm going to come here to my right, and I'm just going to put, we really only need padding on the right. I'm just going to do 25 pixels. And whenever we use padding, let's get into the habit of adding an additional property called box sizing border box. Now what this does is whenever you use padding, it automatically wants to add it to the width of your div. So instead of the div being 502, it would technically be 527. Now what happens if this is 527? It's too many pixels for the two columns. So let me just delete this and I'll show you what it does. Look at where my div goes. It went all the way down here because of this 25 pixels extra padding. So what I have to do is have that border box, and now you can see it pop back up. If I wouldn't have this tag, the other option would be to increase my width. But just get into the habit every time you use padding to use the border box. Okay, so that looks a lot better. Let's just put a break in between the button and the strawberry. So I'm going to put a BR tag, and that kind of just pops that down. All right, that looks great. So now we have two columns here, a two-column layout. We have our navigation ready, our logo ready, and the next thing we're going to do is our 3 columns at the bottom. So if I look back here, I have a red box or div that's going to be behind these 3 columns. And within them, there's these little icons and then typography. But the thing that I want about this div, the red, is I want it to be 100% going all the way across. I don't want it to be boxed into the container. So how we're going to do that is we're actually going to put it underneath the container, like so. So the container, that white box is done. I'm going to come down here and make a new box or div. I will do an ID to just change it up. I only have one big red box on this page. And I'm going to call that red. And here I'm going to comment that this is closing the red, like so. And these are where those 3 columns are going to go. So I'm going to give it a little bit of space. And then in here, I'm going to put div class equals column. And this is an excellent way to show that this, why you would use a class here. We could not use an ID. So I want to repeat the same div 3 times. So I can use the same name, column, column, column. It has to be a class because they all have the same properties. They're all going to be the set width. They're all going to be the same height. They're all going to do the same thing. The content in it is just going to be different. So now that we did that, let's just put something in each one. So I'm going to put just a word. 1, 2, and 3. We'll go back and put some content in a minute after we kind of get it ready to rock. So I'm going to go to my CSS now, and I'm going to do, I need to add red and column. Let's go down here to the bottom. I'm going to do and period column. Note why it has a pound or a period is based on if it's an ID or a class. Don't forget our squigglies. Now, with that being said, so red, I want it to be a background color of that red color. So I'm going to come up here, grab my hex number because I'm organized, and do width 100%, height. What should we make this height? Let's do 300 pixels. Now I could do background color or background image. This is a color. Paste my red. Perfect. Now let's just take a look, make sure we have the red and it's the right size. Perfect. That looks awesome. And you can see a difference of why we took this out of the container. If this would be in the container, it would stop here. And I'll just show you briefly. If I would take this red div and place it in the container. So notice the close of the container is here. And I placed it right here and come back here. It's in the div now. It's physically in that container, and it's also pushing up because there's floats. So that is not going to work. So if it's doing that, you probably just have it at the wrong place. So it should be outside the container below. I'm going to hit save. Okay, we're back. Now let's do our columns. So for my columns, I'm not going to give them like a set width, a pixel value. I'm actually just going to do width 33.3. So that adds up, it's 3 columns, so it adds up to 100. CSS can handle points up to, I think, 3 decimals. So that's good to know. And I'm going to have this float left. And I'm going to do text align center. So all the text will be centered. So each column is going to take 33% of the 100. It's going to be float left and it's going to be centered. And if you come back and look, you should have 3 columns now with the 1, 2, 3. Looks pretty good. Now let's put some real content in this. So in column 1, I'm going to put an image. I have 3 icons in here. There's a mitt. There is a rolling pin. and there is an apron. So each one gets an icon at the top. And then let's put a paragraph on each one. And it's going to be a shorter paragraph. I don't want it to be too much copy. So after the image, I'm going to add a little paragraph tag. Again, to show that we can put more than one thing in a div. You can put an image and a paragraph. I could put an H1, a paragraph, and an image. Feel free to do that. So let's come back here and take a look after you do that. Now you can see that looks pretty nice. You know, we have 3 columns. All 3 of them are 1, 2, 3. I think the text should be white when I'm critiquing this. And I also feel like it needs some padding in between each column and some padding on the top because this is a little too close. So we need a little bit of space. Things are just a little too close to each other. So I'll come back to my CSS and I can fix these things. So the first thing I'm going to do is on the red, I'll add padding. Not margin because I want it to be in between. Let's do a padding of 20 pixels all the way around. Whenever I use padding, I need to use that box sizing border box. And I'm also going to add that same property to the columns. Now let's take a look again. That looks so much better. We just need to make our red a little bit longer for this to work. And we will do that by, where are we, red? Here we go. Let's make that maybe 350. Much better. Okay, last thing I want to do to this before we do the footer is I want to make the copy white. So since these are paragraphs, they're inheriting all this paragraph from above. So what I'm going to do is do something really specific. I'm going to say in the column, period column, spacebar, there's paragraphs, and I want the color of the text in there to be white. That way, let's say I have the paragraph at the top, instead of, this one could be brown for the paragraph above, and the paragraph in the columns, here's the brown, this could be white down below. So that looks awesome. All right, let's just put a footer in this and we will take a break before our other pages. Let's go save this thing and come back here. So last, underneath the red, I'm going to add a footer. Footer, again, is an HTML5 tag, so I don't have to worry about making a div. And I'm going to make a copyright. So how I do that is it's the ampersand copy semicolon, and then I'm going to put spacebar copyright, and that does the C in the circle. Save. And I'm going to come to my CSS. Let's just give these a little bit of text align center. Font size small. And let's put some padding all the way around it so it doesn't touch the red box. Whenever I use padding, right, we need box sizing, border box. Save. And we'll come over here, take a look, and there we have our copyright. So we have a full page that's ready to go for our next pages.